You were never supposed to know this. The gate didn't just close, it activated something buried, something designed not for safety, but for control. And the scream of the sirens that followed, that was the system cracking open. Listen carefully. They told you HOA disputes were about noise complaints, parking rules, neighborly bickering. But they never told you what they were really about. Jurisdiction, hidden authority structures, psychological dominance disguised as order. In a ranch community named Meadowbrook, a quiet place designed for equestrian living, the gate incident triggered more than flashing lights. It tore the mask off a much older machinery. Jake Donovan, a military veteran, thought he was just moving into a peaceful patch of land to train his horses, thunder and lightning. But what he actually walked into was a small-scale experiment in institutional obedience. Karen Peterson wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a sentinel, a loyal enforcer of a silent blueprint stretching far beyond one ranch. A blueprint built to bend people like Jake into submission using rules they didn't write and punishments they didn't understand. From the moment Jake's horses touched those trails, Karen activated her program. A slow escalation of control tactics, noise complaints, petty fines, rewriting history with a clipboard and a stepladder, measuring horses like measuring loyalty. But here's the truth you're not supposed to hear. It's not about horses, not even about gates. It's about systems that train you to forget what freedom feels like. Systems that give one woman the ability to cut off a 1,200-pound animal mid-gallop with the push of a button and call it protocol. These aren't just suburban tyrants. They are the foot soldiers of psychological warfare, polite, pastel-wearing oppressors who turn rules into religion, who weaponize bylaws like scripture, who smile as they crush your autonomy. And when Jake stood between those horses and that slamming gate, he wasn't just stopping a false alarm, he was waking up. Because deep beneath HOA manuals and alarm sirens is the forbidden truth. They've built a world where freedom is an illusion, and the gate was never meant to open for you. If you feel it already, the edge of something darker, tugging at your awareness, keep going, you're not falling, you're awakening, and the descent has only just begun. They say tyranny arrives with boots and guns, but the real kind, the kind that breaks men without ever shedding blood, comes with smiles and clipboards and HOA titles printed in gold foil. Karen Peterson smiled when she fined Jake for hoofprints. She smiled when she shut the gate in his face at 7:00 a.m. sharp every morning. But that wasn't a smile of courtesy, it was ritual. Understand this. Every oppressive regime throughout history, from Babylon to Berlin, followed a pattern, and Karen was following hers down to the syllable. It starts with delegitimization. Jake's horses weren't too loud, they were too free. Too alive, too connected to something ancient, something HOA bylaws were never meant to contain, so she began the script. Accusations of disruption, weaponized interpretation of rules, strategic surveillance masked as concern. But this isn't just about her. Karen was the avatar, the terminal node of a larger, older control system. The administrative class, the clerks of conformity, the priestesses of quiet compliance, because every empire needs middle managers to keep the front lines orderly while the architects sit unseen in the shadows. And this time they dressed them in fleece vests, and HOA badges. Jake's horses weren't the threat. His non-compliance was. His refusal to flatten himself, to file in line, to kneel before regulations not rooted in reason, but in obedience, and what's worse, the rest of the board, Tom, Susan, even the newer residents, they weren't stupid, they weren't blind, they were afraid. You think the ancient empires ruled by force? No. They ruled by fear of being noticed, fear of the clipboard, fear of the whisper campaign, fear that if you speak up, you'll be next. But here's the dangerous question you were never meant to ask. What if fear is the system itself? Karen didn't need to lift a finger to isolate Jake. The rules isolated him. The silence of the other board members sealed him off like a coffin. And in that silence, the machine hummed. The machine of bureaucracy. Cold, ancient, watching. Turning men into subjects, communities into colonies, and horses into contraband. Now, lean in, because this is the part they really don't want you to hear. This story isn't rare. It's everywhere. Your HOA, your office, your school, your town, different names, same structure. They call it order, but it's psychological war, waged with a fake smile and a locked gate. Comment this twice to show you're waking up. The gate is not for safety, it is for control. Drop that below, and we keep going. The transformation begins now. The moment the gate slammed shut on Thunder's flank, it wasn't just metal meeting metal, it was system meeting resistance. The sirens weren't an accident, they were the sound of the lie unraveling. You see, Meadowbrook Ranch had a fail-safe, a $50,000 emergency protocol installed after a wildfire tore through the valley 5 years prior. It wasn't just a gate, it was a surveillance node, a behavioral checkpoint, an AI-enabled network designed to react, record and report, all under the illusion of community protection. But protection from what? Not wildfires, not stampedes. From you. From the moment a man stops submitting and starts thinking. The protocol was activated because Jake's horse, a creature born to roam, tried to cross a threshold Karen didn't approve of. And Karen, she'd reprogrammed the system 17 times in 30 days. Not to improve safety, but to monitor movement. To train Jake like an animal, when to walk, when to stop, when to stay in his box. This wasn't just HOA madness, it was conditioning. Classical, operant, and the same psychological controls used in cults, prisons, and political regimes. Let's be blunt. Every fence is a question, every gate is a decision. Will you wait for permission, or will you push through? And when Jake's horses triggered the lockdown, the system exposed itself. Sirens wailed, strobes lit up, community drones launched into the air. The mask slipped. It was supposed to scare him, to shame him, to make him comply. But here's the twist they didn't expect. He didn't run, he didn't break. He documented. He witnessed. He stood still while the machine overplayed its hand. Because what Karen forgot, what all tyrants forget, is that power is most vulnerable when it tries to show off. Jake watched as the responders arrived, as the vet examined the horses, as the fire department scanned the perimeter. He saw then a protocol. He tracked the behavior. He read the code behind the curtain. And that's when the truth took root. Karen wasn't an anomaly. She was a test unit. And Jake? Jake passed. He didn't just survive the gate. He cracked the deeper truth. The systems around you aren't broken. They're designed to be this way. Efficient, quiet, ruthless. They train you to mistake obedience for peace. But when the sirens scream and the fences close, peace is the first casualty. And from here, the descent only gets darker. You think power wears a crown? No, power wears a stapler. It hides in filing cabinets, spreadsheets, bylaws. Nobody reads. And it speaks in polite emails marked urgent. Karen didn't need an army. She had documents. Rules buried on page 97 of a forgotten HOA handbook, and a community trained not to question them. And when the gate fiasco forced light into the shadows, the paper trail began to bleed. Bill Morrison, the fire chief, flipped open his notepad. Sarah Chen, animal control, pulled the gate's logs. 17 unauthorized changes, surveillance timestamps, manual overrides, a pattern. And then came the cameras. Karen, watching the trail app, smiling, waiting, timing the closure just right to trap thunder mid-step. It wasn't just a mistake. It was a ritual. The gate was her altar, and power, her doctrine. But when power gets comfortable, it forgets to cover its tracks. And Jake, the man they tried to silence with fines and fake rules, just stood there, holding the receipts. The collapse was instant. Tom Bradley, longtime board member, cracked first, confessed to blackmail. Karen had found out about his daughter's graduation party. 5 minutes over the noise limit, $5,000 in threatened fines, unless he voted her way. He voted. Every time. Then, Susan Hartley manipulated over a hedge, 1/2 an inch too tall. A single inch of foliage became the leash around her neck. But the most damning evidence came from Margaret Cooper. 78 years old, steel in her spine. She stepped forward with a folder so thick it thudded when she laid it on the table. Years of harassment, fabricated violations, falsified fines. All of it sent from Karen's official HOA email. She hadn't just controlled the community, she'd colonized it. And what's worse, she thought she'd never be caught, because the system protected her, because the paperwork was in her favor, because the silence was profitable. But here's the deeper truth, the one most men live their whole lives without seeing. Power protects itself until it can't. Then it feeds on its own to survive. Karen's empire was a paper one. But every empire, even the quiet ones, even the ones built with bylaws instead of bullets, has its fall. And Jake wasn't just the spark. He was the reckoning. The gate was never the threat. The gate was the mirror. And now every man in that room had to face what they'd allowed. The real collapse never happens with fire. It happens in silence, when even the machine begins to reject its operator. And on that day, the system turned on Karen Peterson. The sheriff arrived like fate in uniform. Deputy Rodriguez didn't bring emotion. He brought authority stripped in a bare. No small talk, no deferential tone, just a direct statement. You're under investigation for reckless endangerment, false emergency reporting, and misuse of emergency systems. The HOA revoked her access on the spot. No ceremony, no final speech. Just a blinking red lockout screen. It should have ended there, but it didn't, because true justice, transformational justice, is when the spell breaks for everyone. And that's what happened in the emergency HOA meeting that followed. Neighbors poured in, not just to watch, but to testify. Jake wasn't alone. He never was. He was just the first to stop complying. One by one, they spoke. The Johnsons, fined for painting their barn the wrong shade of beige. The Millers, forced to tear down a memorial garden for their daughter because it violated landscaping uniformity. Even Dr. Wells, the veterinarian, banned from visiting sick animals because her truck was too commercial. Do you see it now? This was never about horses, never about order. It was about ritualized subjugation, controlling every inch, every action, every ounce of joy under the guise of community standards. But Karen made one fatal mistake. She believed the system was hers. She forgot the golden rule of tyrants. When your power is borrowed, the lenders will come to collect. The HOA board, once silent, once terrified, now unanimous in her removal. Her allies, gone. Her control, evaporated. But the descent didn't stop there. Audits exposed embezzlement. Private security paid for with community funds. Unauthorized surveillance cameras hidden in birdhouses. Legal slush fund funded by fines used for personal vendettas. The tally, $23,000 in penalties, 200 hours of community service, months of probation, loss of her real estate license, her entire identity deleted. And when the judge read the sentence aloud, Karen's mask finally cracked. Her face went blank. Her mouth moved, but no words came out. She had nothing left to threaten, nothing left to twist. Because once a system built on fear begins to crumble, it doesn't stop. It devours its architect. The gate that once made her a queen, now locked behind her. When tyrants fall, it's rarely explosive. It's quiet, personal. A stillness after the sirens, like the air itself is holding its breath, watching what you'll do next. Karen didn't leave in handcuffs that night. She left in shame. Not because she was punished, but because she was seen, stripped of authority, silenced not by force, but by the collective will of people who finally remembered their power. But this ending, this so-called justice, is only the surface. The deeper truth is more dangerous, because Karen wasn't the disease. She was the symptom. A localized expression of a global virus, the need to dominate through procedure, the desire to control the wild by writing it out of existence. Jake understood that now. He hadn't just fought for his horses, he'd fought for sovereignty. He'd broken a micro-empire and with it the illusion that order equals peace. But that kind of awakening comes at a cost, because once you see how control systems are designed, how bureaucratic tyrants rise in plain sight, how laws are used like lashes, and how silence becomes the greatest collaborator, you can never go back. And neither should you. Meadowbrook Ranch began to change after that day. Not because new rules were written, but because the spell had been broken. The fear evaporated. Neighbors spoke up. The clipboard no longer meant command. People reclaimed their fences, their trails, their rituals. The wild began to return. And if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, then hear me now. This wasn't just a story about a gate. This was a blueprint for you. You've been trained to obey, to defer, to wait for approval, to smile while being strangled by rules you never voted on, in systems you never built, run by people you never chose. But the moment you see the strings, you hold the knife. So ask yourself, what gate stands in your way right now? What name hides behind the rules, watching, waiting, tightening the grip every time you almost speak up? Because this isn't just about HOAs, it's about every system that punishes the wild inside you. And if you're ready, truly ready, to reclaim what was yours before the clipboard, before the silence, before the gate, comment it now. One final time. The gate is not for safety. It is for control. Say it twice. Lock it in. Not just to feed the algorithm. To mark the transformation. Because men like you don't wait anymore. Men like you walk through the gate. Even if they weld it shut, even if they scream violation, even if the sirens howl, you were born free. And now you remember